What do you know about co-teaching, just really quickly?
Two teachers in the same classroom.
Two teachers in the same classroom, okay. Anybody else? Have you ever experienced it? Yes, I see a head nodding.
Sometimes there's like a main teacher, and then there's like another teacher in there, like an assistant.
Okay, like an assistant, okay.
The way that my school did it would be like one teacher would do it one day and then the other teacher would do it the other day.
Okay.
One stands in the classroom, but like the other one would be grading papers.
Okay. Anybody else experience that when they were in school?
Is the co-teacher a student teacher or just two regular teachers?
Well, it started out as two regular teachers. Good question. All right. And the way that co-teaching originally started out was special education teacher would come into the classroom and work with the regular education teacher, because we got more and more and more special education teachers or special education students, into the classroom. And so you, as I'm assuming most of you are going to be regular education teachers, at least now. You may come back and get a master's degree later and decide that you want to work with special education students. But for you, you're going to know the content area and the content material extremely well. State of Michigan says that you have to, right? You have to pass the MTTC, you have to be proficient. So the special education teacher, however, has to be proficient in classroom management, if you will, and they are specific to a particular student usually, or students. So they're going to be looking to assist those students, but you may also have some other students in the classroom that maybe are not special education students, but maybe might need some extra help. And if the two co-teachers do it well enough, you are not going to be able to tell who the regular education teacher is and who the special education teacher is. Question?
I was just saying I've experienced that because I've had the special education teachers in with the regular teachers when I was going to school.
Okay. And sometimes you know who the students that they're focusing on, but lots of times you can't even tell they're that good. And so as time has gone on, we've also had teachers who've decided to job share. And what might happen with that is Vanessa and I might decide that we're going to share a classroom. And maybe she's just had a baby and she wants to only work part-time this year because she wants to spend more time at home. So we're going to share that classroom. That's another form of co-teaching. And maybe one week she works 4 days and then I take over and do 4 days. Maybe we're in every other day. Maybe we choose to do mornings and afternoons.
I had a teacher, like if we had one, it was a math class, and half the semester we had one teacher, and the other half of the semester another teacher would come in. So is that co-teaching too?
It could be. It could be. Sometimes people leave in the middle of a semester for another reason. Typically what would happen with co-teaching, that what I was talking about if Vanessa and I were sharing a classroom, depending on how we decided to share it. The big key here with co-teaching is co-planning. Because I have to know seamlessly what I'm stepping into with the minute she leaves. She has to know what I've been doing in order for her to walk into the classroom, which means we have to talk about where we were, what we've been teaching, who we're keeping an eye on, because maybe there's one person struggling in math that she needs to know about because she's going to teach about tetrahedrons. And like all things in education, it's all about understanding the verbiage. When you're in math, you have math language, correct? When you're writing, you have writing language. So when you're co-teaching, you have co-teaching language, so we have to be able to speak the same language. In your case, I'm going to guess that it probably was not co-teaching. It may have been someone that taught just for half a year and then needed to leave for one reason or another. Maybe it was surgery, maybe it was having a child, maybe, who knows, maybe they took another job. But unless they were communicating together while that first teacher was out, it wouldn't be co-teaching. Does that kind of give you a little better descriptor?
Yeah, except they do that. They did it every year.
Oh, if they do it every year, then,
I mean, I didn't mean the semester. It was like half the year was one teacher, the other half the year was another teacher.
okay.
Class. It was like they did it all the time.
So they were alternating.
Yeah.
Okay. And if that was their particular expertise, they may have felt more comfortable teaching one particular semester versus another. There's a variety of ways to share the classroom. That's the nice thing about teaching. So if you know a little bit now about co-teaching, how do you think that that might work if you were a student teacher? What do you imagine? Well, let's back up here a minute. What do you imagine student teaching to be like right now? Because I don't think any of you are there yet, correct? Is anybody? No? Okay.
When my mom was a student teacher, it started out with, at first she was kind of more like an observer, like she would help the kids, but she wouldn't teach them, and then slowly they would integrate my mom into teaching, and then the actual teachers stepped back from teaching and let her teach the classes.
And that's pretty typical. That's exactly what most student teachers experience, is you come in and it's your classroom, so I'm going to watch what you're doing and I'm going to try to become you, if you will. I'm going to use the same techniques that you're using to handle the classroom management, whatever you have set up for how to sharpen pencils, how to go to the bathroom, how to turn in your paperwork. I'm going to follow exactly what it is that you're doing. And then, you're right, maybe I'm going to take over the introductions in the morning, and then maybe I'm going to take over reading. And then I might take over the math class, and eventually I have the whole day. Now I also have to hand that classroom back, so I can't really be me, can I? I have to keep being that other teacher if I can, or seek permission from that teacher in order to be able to hand that classroom back, because she's going to have to be able to take her kids back, and I won't be there anymore. That's the sad part of leaving student teaching. Well, the state came along and they said, gosh, we want to make sure that all our kids are achieving at this level. And so to do that, we're going to say to teachers, in order to be a good teacher, your kids have to be able to pass this test at this percentage. And the first year, we're not really going to hold it against you. But as the years go on, we are going to look at whether you're effective or not based on your kids' test scores. How do you think that might have affected student teaching?
I don't know about student teaching, but I feel like it makes teachers teach more to the test than the actual material.
Sometimes that's very true. They're trying to hold us accountable for all of the things that we should be teaching. And sometimes testing is not the only way to go. There are other options that we could be using to prove that kids really have gained the knowledge, but the pencil paper is the easiest way. And not every student is good at taking tests. How many of you are happy with taking tests? That's just the way you've been raised and you do well on a test? How many of you feel like you get really nervous and you're not sure you can remember everything and you'd rather have somebody maybe watch you do something or build something or show it in another way? So there are those of us out there that don't do well on tests, and there are those of us out there who do very well on tests. But by making those test scores part of whether or not a teacher is effective, what do you think that that has done to student teaching?
The teachers don't really want to give the classroom to the student teacher because it's going to affect their test scores.
It could.
Job.
It could. It could affect their test scores, and you're right, and ultimately affect their job. So one of the things that we're looking for, and we always want to make a difference in the classroom, even doing it as coming in and observing and then ultimately taking over a little bit at a time and a little bit more at a time. And sometimes today you might find, okay, you're going to take over first hour And then you're going to teach that for a couple of weeks. Now you're going to give first hour back to me, and maybe you're going to teach third hour and fourth hour. And then you're going to give that back to me. So I'm not leaving the classroom, I'm more in the classroom than I used to be, because sometimes teachers would leave. Well, with co-teaching, what happens is the impact is entirely different. We plan together from the very beginning. So whoever you are assigned to, we start working right away, and we start talking the same language, and we start planning. And we say, okay, today, I think maybe Monday next week, when we're sitting down and planning, we might want to do some parallel teaching on Monday in the math class, because this group of kids over here, I'm not quite sure that they're getting it, but if we divide the class in half and we both teach the same lesson at the same time, I'm going to know from my group of kids who's getting it and who's not, and you're going to know from your group of kids who's getting it and who's not. And maybe on Wednesday we might want to do one teach, one assist. And in that case, we have to decide who's going to be the lead teacher. So number one, you're a teacher right from the very get-go. You are not seen necessarily as a student teacher. You are both teachers, and that's probably the biggest difference in the philosophy of co-teaching. Remember when I said at the beginning that it needed to be seamless if we were handing it back and forth? So if we're going to use a student teacher as a co-teacher, it has to be just as seamless. So there's some planning that has to happen with all of that to begin with. You and your mentor teacher have to meet ahead of time and talk. You and your mentor teacher have to speak the same language. You have to be willing to give and take. And it's hard to give and take because maybe that's my area of expertise and I really don't want you to teach that. That's mine. I want to teach that. So there has to be some sharing of what we like to teach and what maybe we don't like to teach as much. So those kinds of conversations are hard to have. And do you always get along with everybody? In my world, I'd love it to happen, but it doesn't. So there may be days where we might be bumping heads and we have to find a way to talk to each other. And that's true no matter how you're student teaching. That's true when you get your first teaching job, and no matter who's next door to you or what special ed teacher or what other teacher is going to come in and co-teach with you. It doesn't matter. There are just some of those days. There are other things that you're going to need to talk about, because one of the things you're going to want to do is grow and improve as a teacher. So your mentor is going to help you with that. So when we're talking about one teacher and one assist, the person that's in the front of the classroom might be the mentor teacher, and you might be doing the assisting on a particular day, traveling around the room and helping those kids who need the extra assistance. There are other ways also to co-teach, and there's 5 of them to be exact. We might even decide to use one of the ways to co-teach, and we might decide that Matthias is going to take the group that is really not struggling, and he's going to move them on. And I'm going to take the group that maybe needs a little more remediation or a little more time to get a concept or a little more work. We may decide to flip-flop that on another day. So we're not always teaching the same group. We might decide to have stations in our room. So you're going to take one station, you're going to take the other station, and the third station, a bit a little chaotic, is going to be on its own, working independently. Doesn't mean that you're not still monitoring. You know the old adage about keeping eyes in the back of your head. You are still going to be monitoring what's going on in that station, but then you're going to rotate people around. So you have a variety of ways that you can co-teach. What do you think some of the problems might be? I mentioned a couple of them with co-teaching.
Missing what somebody else teaches, like being a step ahead or a step behind what they've already taught.
Mm-hmm. What else do you think might be?
So you might learn, or a student might learn better from one teacher's teaching style than the other, if that makes sense. So like in some stuff they're like achieving, the other stuff they might be struggling, and just depending on the style.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever had a teacher that you really, really liked, or a teacher that you really, really didn't like? So if you have one that you really, really like, you tend to what? Do better, pay attention, okay? And if you have one that maybe you don't like quite so well, do you find yourself maybe drifting a little bit, and all of a sudden you catch yourself going, oh yeah, I missed something. So you're right, you could run into that. What else might you run into?
Area of expertise.
Area of expertise, that's true. We mentioned that a little bit, didn't we? But we didn't do anything in depth with it.
Not getting along with the other teacher.
Ooh, that could be a big problem if you aren't getting along with that other teacher, right? Yeah. Have you taken any of Vanessa's classes yet? Will they take yours?
Almost everybody should see me at one point or another.
Okay. Then you will see some co-teaching that happens. And what happens when people co-teach, and Vanessa co-teaches with Heidi, and they plan together, they work things out, and does it always go the way you planned?
Almost never.
Okay. So you have to be able to kind of have that little give and take too, but they work very, very well together. And then when it's all said and done, you're going to reflect, talk about what changes you would make for the next time. Sometimes we don't have time to do that, to be totally honest with you, but we try. And we try to take a look at what could be better the next time around. Well, one of the things that has happened to make co-teaching at least a little easier is a handy dandy little cheat sheet. So down the side are all the different ways that you can co-teach. And then there's your chart for the week. So if you use your markers, you can do some planning together. And you can decide how and when people are going to be delivering the lesson. And on the back side, because we don't always know how to talk to people, or we might feel just a little intimidated by speaking to someone that's already a teacher and saying, well, I have an idea, right? So there is a way to talk to your teacher and say, I'd like to try something when we're doing our parallel teaching, and here's what I would like to try. But because we're parallel teaching, you'd have to do it too. So there are conversation starters and ways to talk to your mentor teacher. By the same token, we have a sheet for your mentor teacher that talks to them and helps them to talk to you too about the same types of things. Because, for instance, I might want to know, let's see, when we're planning, are we going to have regular scheduled times to meet? Are we going to discuss afterwards at a regularly scheduled time how things went? Especially as a student teacher, that might be important for you to know. And some teachers like to come in early in the morning. Some teachers stay late into the evening. So finding that time period when you can be there and they can be there, because you're going to want to stay if they stay, and what's a good time to talk and what's a good time to plan. And maybe you're going to initially start out on a daily basis, maybe you're just going to do it once a week. You might want to talk about who's going to have the lead role on a particular day and what that role is going to look like. And you might even want to know that a week out, so that if you're the lead teacher, you might bring some things in and say, here's what I'm thinking about doing, and talking to that mentor teacher ahead of time so that you are planning together, because they may already have some ideas about how they want things to go. It truly is their classroom, and we are the guest, but the impact needs to be where? On the kids. And what they found is when teachers plan together and truly co-teach together, that is where the difference is found, is that the learning for those kids goes up. And that is the major reason to do some co-teaching versus handing the classroom over, which was done to me and probably to you. And so we do want to make an impact on the learning of those students. Can you see where maybe parallel teaching would do that? Because you have a group and I have a group, and we're both teaching the same thing at the same time, but now there's less kids, so I'm going to be able to eyeball every one of them and know what's going on and whether or not they really are learning, versus having a classroom of 30 or 35 and maybe using clickers. I might be able to figure out, clickers are going to help me as to who's answering and who I need to go and help, but I might not be able to figure that out too. What other kinds of things do you think you'd need to be able to do as a co-teacher? Well, we know we have to collaborate, right? We're taking you out of your comfort zone. We know you're going to make an impact on those kids. Exactly. You do have to have fun in the classroom. So who else do you have to have fun with? With the other teacher. You do have to have room for some fun in there. You have to have fun with the kids that are learning, that are now your kids. And you have to have fun with that mentor teacher or co-teacher that you are now sharing the classroom with. What else might you need to know when you're co-teaching? What else are we thinking about here? Think about what you do in your classes.
We'll probably learn from each other.
You are going to learn from each other because you're going to come out with the latest and the greatest, and they may have been in the classroom for a while. But I'm thinking about one thing in particular, and that was a good one. Do you have to turn things in? Mm-hmm. Do you have homework? What happens to that homework?
It's be graded.
Exactly, it has to be graded. So who do you suppose is going to do that? Uh-huh. And how about parent-teacher conferences? You're both going to do it. And when you are initially greeting that class and talking to the parents for the first time, because typically when school begins we might have an open house, right? I think your parents probably went to a few open houses when you were in both elementary school, middle school, and high school, right? And in middle school and high school they might have even rang a bell and they followed your schedule. So if there are two of us, the parents need to be reassured that if you speak to one of us, you're speaking to both of us, because we are going to communicate with each other. So if you tell me something, Vanessa's going to know it. If you tell Vanessa something, I'm going to know it, because we are really one. So the same thing happens with the grading. If we're grading those papers, we might want to figure out how to grade pretty similarly. So we're going to have to talk about what it is that we're looking for on those papers and what it is, how we're going to grade those. I might even take a stack of papers home, take a look at them, and initially keep a score sheet and write down some things, and then hand the stack of papers over to Vanessa so she can do the same thing, and then we might talk about those papers. It might take longer, but you may get better feedback from two of us rather than one of us. So it could change the look of the whole classroom, if you will, when you talk about grading papers. Because instead of just getting red marks all over your paper like they used to do, you may get feedback from both of us that say, have you thought about, could you take this story to the next step? I'm wondering if, in addition to, I think you did a great job, or specific praise. I like how you took this character and really developed them. So you would need to talk with your teacher about that too. But teaching itself is exciting. And then when you have somebody there to help you, it becomes even better. And making a difference for those kids is first and foremost. Questions you might have. Are you excited about getting into the classroom?
Do teachers get to choose if, once you are a teacher and however long you've been teaching, do you choose if you want student teachers within your room, or are they just kind of like, you know what I'm saying?
Here, have a student teacher.
Right. Is it a choice, or is it kind of like a required?
Oh, every school is going to be a little bit different, okay? But most of the time what's going to happen is the principal is going to come around and say, you haven't had a student teacher in a while. And we have one from Grand Valley, or we have one from Ferris, or we have one from Hope. And would you consider meeting this person and seeing if it's a good fit? So yes, there is going to be some choice. And sometimes teachers work as a team. So you might find, for instance, 3 kindergarten teachers working together. And that is similar to co-teaching. But so they may choose to take on a student teacher, and that student teacher may even rotate between the 3, or it could be that they're each going to take a student teacher at that particular time. And think of the learning that would happen there, because you'd have 3 teachers and 3 student teachers at that particular point. Some of the schools, because of the changes, have decided that they are only going to let teachers take student teachers every so many years, whether that's 3 years or 5 years. And when we send you out, if you will, on the rabbit trail trying to find you that perfect fit for where you're going to do your 40 hours or your 80 hours or your student teaching, we send out information, a little blurb about you, possibly student teaching. We send out a whole lot more, but one of the things that that we're looking for there in a mentor teacher is someone that's been teaching for a while. So 4 years, 5 years, someone that has tenure, someone that's highly recommended by the principal, someone that we know is going to do a good job with the classroom as well as with you. So, does that kind of help? Yeah?
Why wouldn't being placed with a second year teacher be good? Because I feel like that's kind of more relatable. So you can ask them questions like, how was your first year? Or like, how'd you get into the job?
True. But a second year teacher, having your own classroom is huge. And let me back that up just a little bit. Are any of you subbing? Awesome. If you have time in your schedule, it's wonderful to be a sub and to go out there and experience that. But let me tell you, subbing is not like being a teacher in a classroom. All right, it isn't. It's wonderful in the sense that you've gotten in and you've gotten to relate to kids, you've seen lesson plans, you know about tornado drills, you know about all the craziness that happens in schools today. But you aren't writing the lesson plans. So having your classroom by yourself for the very first time, the first year, there are so many mistakes that I made. And there are so many learning experiences that I had. And even the second year, you're still growing. And so we prefer to have you with somebody that's, shall we say, been around for a little bit and that isn't as new in the classroom, that's had some experience, so that they can help you to grow too. And I'm not saying that we're going to put you with Mrs. Doubtfire, okay, although she'd be great fun. And it may be someone that is younger. It's not necessarily going to be somebody my age, okay? But what you're looking for, just like when you interview for that first job, is you're looking for that marriage, that good fit. And that's what you're looking for too when you're co-teaching. You're looking for that good fit, that marriage. Is it going to work between the two of us? Are we really going to be able to get along that well? Because we may not be best friends, but we can co-teach well together. So when you're placed in the 40 hours and the 80 hours, you are looking to learn from that teacher, but you're also looking for that good fit. And they're looking for a good fit, and especially with student teaching, as you mentioned. You know, do they just say, hey, I want you to take this student teacher? No, they're going to want to interview you and ask you some questions. And some of the questions they might ask you are about co-teaching. They might ask you, well, you know, how do you feel about planning together? What's your philosophy on a particular subject? Tell me what your thoughts are in terms of a student that's struggling. What experience have you had with classroom management? So they may ask you some tough questions too, because they're looking for good marriage, but they don't expect you to know everything. And by the time you're ready to student teach, your toolbox will be filled with so many things. You'll think maybe you're not ready, but you are. And you will be able to pull things out of that toolbox and help. Somebody mentioned over here that you're going to have ideas that maybe you're going to share with that co-teacher or with that mentor teacher. And that's very true. You might know something about technology. We were talking earlier about, what was it, Snapchat? Okay, I don't know how to Snapchat, but you do, and now I know more about Snapchat, all right? So there are all kinds of things that you can teach us. Anything else that I can answer for you? Yes?
With parallel teaching, if there's two things happening at the same time, how do you keep one group from being distracted by the other group?
Oh, that's entertaining. You may not be able to, totally, all right? Kids are kids, so they're going to turn around, especially if my best friend is in your group, all right? So there's going to be a little bit of that, but because you're the teacher, you're going to be able to keep the focus going within the group. And it's going to be loud and it's going to be messy, but then what in life isn't?
Is it more like if you're in different groups?
It's in different groups, so we'd be on different parts of the classroom possibly. I may even choose to take my group outside if it's a particularly nice day, but then I'm going to have to really keep an eye on the time. And we're going to have to watch the noise level in the room. You're exactly right, because the acoustics in a lot of the classrooms aren't necessarily the greatest, and my group might get really excited over something funny I said, and then your group might want to know what's going on over here, or you may have discovered something really great in talking to the group of kids that you have, and your group might get really excited, and then my group's going to want to know what's going on. And there's a point too where at the end we could do some sharing once we're done parallel teaching, and just take that 5 minutes to kind of do a wrap-up. Good question. Other things you're thinking about? Other questions you might have?
I was wondering, how common is this for student teaching right now? Is this the direction that the schools are heading?
Well,
A chance that we'll run into that.
At this particular point in Michigan itself, there's not a lot of co-teaching that's going on. It happens to be happening out west a little bit more than it is here, but it's drifting this way as most things do. Think about your fashions. They come to us from both sides of the United States, right? And then we get them in Michigan, and sometimes we're a little bit behind and sometimes we're ahead of the game. It just depends on how things fall. So co-teaching is something that has been around Michigan for a long time, but as far as with student teachers, relatively new. But they are finding statistically that if they do co-teaching with the student teachers feel like they're better supported, like they're being seen as an actual resource in the classroom, and they do a greater amount of learning because of the planning that happens together, and they're finding the impact that they're making on the kids in that classroom is also greater because there are 2 teachers teaching in that room. And there are 2 teachers that are working together, focusing on whatever it is that they need to focus on. And they know their students very, very well. And so I think you will see more of it as time goes on. We're talking about trying to do a little bit of that with Ferris, with student teaching and implementing. So.
I can say in our 289 class, we did a little co-teaching. We had to do like mini teaching episodes, and in my group, it just so happened that there's 3 people in it, so it was a little bit more difficult than just like teaching with 2 people. I noticed.
Okay.
We had it like planned out well, but as far as like walking around and talking to everybody, I feel like it was more difficult with 3 people within a small classroom, if that makes sense. So it's interesting.
Well, and back to your question, and your 3 sparked something in my mind, and that is you're going to be observed, right? When you're doing your student teaching, you're going to be observed when you do your 80 hours, and you're going to be observed when you do your 40 hours. So when someone comes in to observe you, they are also going to talk to that mentor teacher. So if the 2 of you are working that closely together, think of how rich that discussion's going to be when you sit down and talk with that university supervisor or the instructor who comes into that classroom. And you're right, 3 is a little bit more difficult to do. It's kind of like odd man out. Yeah. Other things. What's percolating? Anything in particular? No? Well, if you think of things after I leave, or you would like to know more about anything that we talked about tonight, I'll make sure that I leave some business cards with you, and you are more than welcome to email me. I do text. I may not Snapchat, but I do text.
Thank you so much.
No problem, no problem. So thank you all, too. I hope I gave you a little bit of information and a little insight into what you might be seeing in the future.